Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to Hong Kong, and welcome to episode 32 of International Expansion Explained. I'm really happy to welcome Lina Bartuseviciute today as my guest to talk about strategies for successfully launching food brands in China in 2025. Now, Lina helps international food and beverage brands sell to Chinese consumers. So she is fluent in Chinese, unlike me, and she's lived in China for 15 years. Her company, Litao, has just celebrated its 10th year in business, if you saw her posts this week, maybe. At the moment, Lina is automating all of the know how that she's gained in her years of experience running an international business and launching different tech tools to optimize the export processes and bring cultures together by utilizing AI. Her startups at the moment are funded by the European Commission and also the Hong Kong government to achieve these really ambitious business goals. Lina, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for this introduction, Kathryn.
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask first up if maybe somebody who's watching live on LinkedIn, if you could just put a hi or something in the comments, just so that we see that we are connected. The tech tells us that we're connected, but I always do like to ask the question just to
Never
be sure.
know.
Yeah, one time I had a hiccup that was a little bit difficult to resolve. So,
Happens
yeah,
to the
these things
best of
happen.
us.
So, Lina, before we get into the real meat of what we're going to talk about today, could you maybe just give us like a quick rundown? How did you kind of land in China and how did you get to where you are now in international business?
Oh, these are very different stories. How I landed in China is I just didn't feel that I belonged to the post Soviet society where I was raised. I felt probably there is a different way to communicate with people, to form relationships, and I started learning Chinese language and culture since the age of 13. So it's been quite
Wow.
a while. And I was really determined to
Thank you,
find my
Christian.
answers about philosophy, about how to think about life, how to think about connection to people, to society. And my entry to China was really not for business, but for me. I really wanted to find a different way of thinking about things. And, in Europe, we follow the logic of Aristotle that there is the absolute truth, and the truth has value even if nobody can reach that goal. China is the opposite. The truth is only embodied, and it's only if you can walk the talk, then it is true. So, this paradox was kind of very difficult for me to learn, and it took me many years until I felt comfortable with understanding that both of these are true and both of these societal structures exist. But this was my real reason for why I came to China. So, I started studying Chinese in 2006, and how I entered international business was because I was fluent in Chinese. So I grew up with a dad who was running a business, so I could understand the structures and how it works, how the money moves, how you get to sell. I've seen it since growing up. And basically, I somehow had it in my blood almost. This is what people were telling me, because when they hired me for translation or interpretation, they would find that I will bring much more to the table.
Yeah.
And slowly, with every step, they found that they need more than just the language. And
Hmm.
then I learned how to give them more. And, the first project was a couple hundred, the next was a couple thousand. And then, it kept growing. And my team, yeah. It's been
That's
quite a ride. Yeah, unexpected. I didn't plan for it. It's just people needed help, and I, as a translator, I'm trained to listen very carefully, and I'm trained to go to the thought before I go into the words, right?
yes.
So
Yes.
then you need to start reading minds
Mhm.
as an interpreter, especially simultaneous when you interpret live. And I'm trained to do that. I've done that. So that means that you really need to be very adept and very like on point. You need to be really present. So This actually translates quite well to business. And now I found the technology, because first you need to go to the idea and then find the functions, the ease, the right way of presenting it. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I know quite a few people who've had a, not in China, but who've had a similar path that they've started out and their language skills, especially in a, let's say, a market that was opening up in some way to a certain region of the world. And if they've had the language skills to bridge that gap at the right time, that they've later been able to develop a business, or they've been found good positions in daughter companies of international businesses, because starting out as a kind of assistant and translator interpreter, but actually because they've been trained, like you say, to really actively listen to what's being said and really understand something before you tell somebody else what it is, then it's a great way of getting into things, I think.
So imagine some of my first clients were the biggest people, the biggest corporations in the world. Even they needed help understanding Chinese way of thinking, you know? So then they needed me to translate EBITDA. We negotiated Excel sheets, you know, the budgets. And for
Mhm.
me to be able to live, like I'm talking to you now live, interpret that to Chinese. I mean,
Mhm.
I needed to understand the content.
Yes.
Then I'm not a trained CFO. I'm a trained, at that time, a trained translator. Then I became a trained, well, in political science, diplomacy. So this also helps to read in between the lines if you're a trained diplomat. Um, so you're right. And I've seen a lot of beautiful examples where people at first worked as an interpreter, personal assistant, and then used that same industry and somehow reinvented it, making it easier for more people to have access to that. And I have like a list of people that come to mind, which is very, very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. So if we move over a little bit to our kind of main topic for today, and we're setting the scene just a little bit, why is it that companies perceive the Chinese market to be quite as complicated to break into successfully? Or why is it that they see that this Chinese food distribution ecosystem is such a hard thing to get into? Because you tend to see companies who are either very euphoric about the idea of China, and they have this very, I would say, idealistic approach, which is also unrealistic because they're kind of thinking the streets are paved with gold. This was in the past, probably. Yeah, I think this, I think that this kind of approach is less common these days. But the other option is they think that if they go to China, then they're automatically going to, it's going to be a black hole for money. They're automatically going to have a really difficult time, even if it's a big market, but they still feel that they have to be there because it's so huge, the opportunity. Why
I
is it
think
that
they have to be
people,
there.
yeah.
I think they have to be there. I think it's true. I think that the Chinese consumers are some of the most fascinating consumers in the world, really.
Hmm.
And you can tap into unique niches, and there will be 100 million people in that niche. And I think it's awesome. I believe that we, being raised and trained in Europe, we believe certain things. Like, and a well educated person will speak English. This is what we believe. A sophisticated person will go to theater. This is what we believe. Very well educated person will be interested in books. This is what we believe. In China, it's not. In China, the people will test me by giving me some shitty tea. And if I say, wow, it's great tea, they will know I'm not at all into tea. They will not tell me what they're giving me, but because I've been drinking tea for 15 years, I take a sip, I can tell you what tea it is. But
Hmm.
that's a test of my experience, right?
Yes.
So the people who come to China often they expect the CEO to speak English, and I expect the CEO to know how to sell, right? So
Yep.
I think this is why there is this gap in what we bring to the table, what we expect. We expect it to be easy. We expect everyone to speak English because it's normal. Is it though? I've seen beautiful examples of people speaking, say, Italian and Chinese. They don't even bring English to the table, you know.
Hmm.
And they're able to communicate with Chinese because they speak really good Chinese. Nobody needs English there, but you really need to know how to communicate to Chinese consumers. So I think maybe this is the assumption that seems challenging, but if you only hire an interpreter or somebody who speaks Chinese, I think you will be bypassing that problem altogether. What do you think? I don't know. For me, it feels like we bring so many assumptions from our European background that when you're so rigid in your truth, which I started from, right?
Hmm.
Um, you don't see the opportunities outside of what you brought there already.
Very true. And I think that also European companies bring with them very often bring with them, of course, it's not all of them, but many European companies bring with them quite a rigid idea about how they want to do the business. And that
Mhm.
is then very, very difficult to actually, that's then very, very difficult to actually translate into a good partnership within China. Because let's say the CEO visits China with the export manager or whoever is responsible for Asia, and they expect that they go into a company, they can immediately start to talk business, um, and they don't always realize that they have to lay that foundation of at least talking to people and getting a little bit of a feel of what is the lay of the land and how are those people, how are those companies. if you don't have if you don't have Chinese, I mean, my time in the past in corporate when I was in China, I mean, I don't have fluent Chinese. I had basics to be polite from the very beginning, and not this. I had two really good importers. Neither of them, the CEO, spoke English, but they had people in their teams who spoke English, and who over time grew into the business in the same way that we all did as well. And I think that that's, if you can give it the time to establish that relationship, then you can have some really great business. But you have to be interested in the people and the culture and the way of doing business on the other side, because just because it's different, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that that's something that European companies are often a little bit arrogant about, thinking it's my way, that's the only way to do things, and everything else is somehow less. I think that's a problem.
I thought about this and I asked somebody responsible for public diplomacy in Singapore during a book presentation here in Hong Kong. It was awesome, very well known name. So he said that back in the day when Europe had all the money and China had little, we could come and tell them what to do. Now China has the money and Europe has very little, so we need to come and listen. So simple.
Yes.
The only contract in China that you have is leverage. You
Yeah.
need to know how to make deals and how to leverage. So I believe that people expect to just supply the products and the products then they become almost like a commodity. But today you need to sell a brand. And so your partner needs to be somebody who knows how to develop the brand. They become the brand builders for you. So you need to support them with all your heart, with all your resources, and with all the team, because the Chinese consumer, man, they have it all, you know?
They are
The
the pickiest of consumers because they have so much choice available. They have the
also
option.
you can produce anything in China, anything that looks like European too. So then how do you stand out? How do you prove you bring value? These are the questions that are very important to think before you come to China. What is really the value that you deliver here to the end consumer? What will be the benefit to their life, everyday life? How will you make them happier than they are today?
Mhm.
How many companies can answer this? They don't think about it. They come to gamble. Sorry.
Yeah. Or sometimes they come and they say, we're made in Italy, or and they don't actually have a brand story as such. I'm like, well,
No.
that's a little bit thin as a USP. I mean, it might have worked 25 years ago, but now those days are gone. I mean, so
When it was the first Italian coming to China, right?
yes, yeah, yeah. But I think it's also that question is, or I think many companies ask themselves the question, is China even a market that a smaller brand should be targeting for their international expansion if they don't have, let's say, if they don't have big export experience? Or should they start out by targeting something either closer to home or a market which is maybe smaller but in Asia? I think that those are questions that often come up as to, as a smaller brand, no, China is too big, or they think they can go to China, but it will be easy. It will be easy in the sense of we just put the products there and it will sell because everything sells. And then you get all of these kind of misconceptions, don't you, of the amount of work you need to do. China isn't let's let's just do a little bit of China. You have to go kind of with your full heart and your full energy into the market to really learn about the market if you want to be successful there, but then you can be very successful.
So, what is a smaller brand? What is the ambition of that smaller brand? I talk about this all the time. Do you want to be acquired? Do you want to scale out? Do you want to build a factory in China? What is the goal of doing what you do? First, it's this question that you need to answer for yourself. Like, what are you doing with your product? What is the whole point of doing this at all? And then from here on, if you're very clear with the answer, then there are many things you can do. But what is a smaller brand though? Anything compared to United States and Europe is very small. Everything is smaller, you know,
Mhm.
because it's so fragmented and fractional. So I've seen very small brands do a little trick. So let's imagine, so you've been to China. Let's imagine Chinese food in China and Chinese food in the United States. Is it the same?
No,
Is it Chinese?
rarely.
So same with Italian food. Like Italian food in Austria is probably not the same as it's in Rome, right? But you buy into this idea of Italian,
Hmm.
and you buy into an experience. So I've seen what smaller brands are doing. They create a product that is, say, European Union quality product specifically for Chinese market, together with their importers. So I have worked on these projects where we
Hmm.
team up with partners and we spend a year creating a product, testing it with the business partners, testing it with the consumers, testing it with the e-commerce operators, and then it is, let's say, very little investment, because if you build a factory, which a lot of companies start from, say it's 3 million euros, but if you spend a year developing a product together with a Chinese partner and really target the right consumer, really develop the right product, you can reach the first million in a few years in sales. And probably this 1 year of operation will cost you 50 to 100,000 euros to really create that product and outsource it to a proper, established and registered factory. So this is a different way of doing business. So what's the point of entering this, whole area of food and beverage? What do you want here? If you want really like good cash flow, definitely export to China. It's 100% advance payment for any load before production. So is it a difficult market? I think it's easy, like the money is so much more reasonable. You don't put your money down the pipe before there is a person who wants it. But then it takes a little bit of work to prepare for your product to be able to reach that stage where it's interesting for people. And I think that a meaningful way to achieve that would be starting to create a product for Chinese consumer from the beginning.
And is that the way that, let's say, all of your most successful brands go, or do some of them come with, let's say, some existing core products that you just adjust for the Chinese market?
Both.
Okay.
We always need to adjust the
Yes.
packaging.
Yeah, of course,
Always need
packaging, but
to.
formulation and the core
Yes.
taste and so on is
Yes. We
something
had
that
a
some countries.
massive success with mayonnaise, which we made sweeter and more
Mhm,
fat. So you need to talk to your buyer, like when you really, and normally it's me who spends half a year negotiating and talking to the buyer, and then the CEO comes. The CEO doesn't come for the first meeting, maybe number 5, number 6,
mhm,
um, to really close and discuss the details, or really to just show their face. But really, like, you need to really make sure that they're interested in this product, that there is that opportunity, that there are these consumers for this, and you need to start from ground up and tell stories why this is better for you. And now all the functional foods, there are stories where some of the most difficult diseases were managed better because the supplement structure in Europe or in the US is much stronger as compared to the permitted amounts in China. So a lot of people became healthier because somebody figured out that particular unique application for that product, which is invisible in Europe, right? You don't know that a certain group of Chinese people could be sick with this, and your product, because of this particular
yeah,
ingredient list, could be beneficial. So, what if you actually, from day one, before you even spend 3 million building a factory, if you really figured it out, which of these consumers will benefit from my value the best, and start from there? Wow, that would be a different world, no?
yeah, absolutely. But
But you need to speak some Chinese, right? Or hire
you
someone who
need to
speaks.
hire somebody who speaks some Chinese for you. And I mean,
I think maybe this is the biggest misconception. There are a lot of prejudice, stereotypes, and I think, like, for me, it's very easy to come in and say, "Hi, my name is Lina. How are you?" But then a lot of people, they don't know, is am I saying it right? Like, just say it, right? They're not so comfortable being themselves and stand strong representing the brand. But I think the companies that do well, they really know why they do, what is the value they bring to the world, and then they feel so relaxed coming and saying, look, this is what we do, what do you think? And then what do they think should be very open. They can think many things, and every little thing that they share with you is so valuable if you are talking to somebody who's in the business for 15 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's always fascinating to see the different attitudes that companies have when they go into new markets, because there are some companies who, even without you telling them that that's necessary, they come into the market and they say, what do we need to adapt for the market in order to be successful? Of course, packaging, there are lots of companies, most companies accept that their packaging has to be, let's say, adapted to at least be legally compliant. But I often find that companies are less willing to adjust their formulation because they're sometimes worried, certainly within Europe, it happens to them, that if they sell one formulation in one market and a different formulation in the other market, it happens all the time with Ferrero, with Nutella, for example, that consumers are looking and they're comparing the product that they could buy in Italy or Germany with the product that they can buy in Macedonia, Latvia, or maybe in the Ukraine. And they're picking at the differences. Is this really the right product? Is this better quality, different quality? And it means a lot of explanation for the brand. And I think that that's also something that brands are a little bit afraid of in many cases.
I think you need to invest in a good PR specialist. So when we brought Lithuanian milk to China, the stocks of each stock listed milk company rose 4 times. 4 times, you understand? And it never fell down, even though there were not massively, big exports. But this opportunity of China market with the
Yeah.
right PR and communication and publicity, this allowed each of the company that got access to China
Mhm.
rise the stock prices 4 times, 4 times, right?
Yep. They're crazy
So,
numbers, aren't they?
and this is something that I was a part of, right? I've seen it happen. So it's not something from the books. I know exactly how it happened and why, right? So I think you need to speak very openly and clearly. And we do a lot of this with the brands. We make official statements that are visible both to the consumers and the business partners. And also, does the Chinese food in America sell well? Yes, it does. Would the Chinese food, the way we eat it in China with chicken feed and all, would this sell in America? No. So, like you need to read your consumer, right? Like
Mhm.
what we found with mayonnaise, it was spectacular that they wanted fat and they wanted sweet. And they call it mayonnaise. So who are we to judge? So actually we created a different SKU, different brand, so it looks different than what they sell
Mhm.
in Europe. And the end result, the client said, we learned to make better products, even for the native market, because of this nagging, picky Chinese consumer. Um,
Yep. Yes, I've been in the situation before where, I was in the baby food business, and of course, rice powder was one of the most critical, like cereal powder was one of the most critical topics for China after infant formula. And when you deliver rice to an Asian market, Asians know rice in the same way that many Asians know tea, you know, that and they would open a packet and say, this batch, it smelled weird. Or, you would get feedback that was very, very specific about the rice, and to a European, there was no difference because, people were not used to that people were not used to that kind of level of distinction within what for them seems like a basic product that I think Hashi, is that you who's hiding behind LinkedIn user? Maybe. Um, people didn't realize that there were nuances in the product that a picky Chinese consumer would notice and would ask questions about because they wanted to be sure that they were really buying the branded product and not something that had been made in China. They wanted to be sure that if they're paying a lot of money for the product, they are actually getting what they're paying for, and that's a fair enough as expectation to have, right? I mean, if you're paying a lot of money for a branded product, you need to be sure that you're getting the very best that that company can produce, and that you're actually getting what you're paying for.
But
It's
even the cheap brands on Tmall, if you buy anything, the consumer waits 15 seconds for the person who's a customer support
Mhm,
agent to reply. 15 seconds. If they don't get a reply, they go to the next shop. And the question can range from, does this skirt go with this blouse that I picked? It ranges from, why is this white milk too white?
mhm,
Or I don't like I don't like the flavor aftertaste or whatnot, right? And all of this needs to be addressed. So what we do with the brands, we have a frequently asked question list, which is the most bizarre, unexpected questions. But
mhm,
then when you understand that what you're bringing is the same as if I would be bringing Jatsai to Austria. Now in China, Jatsai, it's a pickled root. It
yeah,
goes into every congee in the morning. And if you go into a supermarket, I really want to do one thing. I want to film supermarkets in China and show people what it looks like. They don't know. Your product doesn't go into the same category as you're used to. This is number one. It always goes to a different category. You need to think about things differently from their
yeah,
perspective. So you need to educate them with this jiacai. So imagine if I put it in your supermarket in China, there's the whole shelf of this jiacai vegetable, pickled vegetable, and uh, if I want to sell it to the Austrian person, I would need to explain what is this vegetable, how is it pickled, why
yep,
does it taste good, what is the health benefit, what is the nutritional, situation and stuff like that. And then I can maybe sell it, but
mhm,
maybe is the keyword here. So then when you bring a foreign product to Chinese market, which thinks it's a 5,000 year food culture, I could, I have an education in Chinese studies, so I could challenge that claim, but still the people believe that.
Hmm.
And they have had everything all along, and now you're bringing something new. So where does it fit in? Why? So I understand, especially when you're challenging their own products or bringing better rice than the Chinese. I mean, you need to really think about the ingredient geek trend where they're analyzing every ingredient. And I have seen very successful brands, one from Portugal, who sells beer, and it starts from the ingredients of the beer. And instead
Yes.
of presenting how people are pouring the beer, they're presenting a cup filled with the ingredient and explaining this is the percentage of this. And then this gives a different perspective to the value of this product to the consumer. I saw there was a comment, and it's that distracted me. Maybe you want to read it?
Which one of my comments?
About Pepsi and Coca-Cola
Ah,
sometimes.
about Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Hershey. Yes, exactly how Pepsi and Coke customized for Asian markets.
It's not only Asian. Every market they have their own recipe. So it's I think what people imagine is that China is very different. But what we talked about before is that there is exactly the same amount of paperwork required for selling in your native market. It's exactly the same amount of paperwork required to sell to the next market of 3 million people. The difference here is that it's 1.5 billion. But the work is the same. You need to talk to the local consumers, you need to listen, you need to localize, adapt. Sometimes more, sometimes less. But Coke and Pepsi, they adapt to every single market.
Yeah.
So I don't think China is in any way special. Yeah.
At least if you look at any, let's say, if you look at any international business textbook, all of the things that they do, they're working according to the textbooks. And lots of other companies, they're looking to, let's say, enter into the market and do some, they're arguing with themselves whether chicken and egg, whether they need to localize before they go into the market
They're
or whether
gambling. That's what I keep telling you. They're gambling. The
yeah,
people who follow the textbook, they reach the goals because they plan and execute. The people who are gambling, they're like, let's try and see, right?
yeah, let's see. No, no, we're good with your inputs. Thank you. Um,
I also think that another issue with bringing Pepsi and Coke to the example is that my clients, when I bring a big corporate as a benchmark, they feel uneasy. They want small benchmarks. They want something that is relatively achievable. And then the comparison to these big giants is just not achievable. But actually, it is because everybody goes through the same, which we keep talking about. But actually, we need to go and look at the Chinese brands instead. What
yeah,
did this brand in that niche or in that category? What did they achieve, and how were they successful?
yeah. And a lot of those brands in the category, I think that a lot of the Chinese brands who are successful, even the older brands for things like, I don't know, White Rabbit candy and so on,
Hmm.
they don't just sit there like many traditional European brands. If you look at the way that they do marketing in Europe, they do marketing the way that they've always done the marketing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whereas I feel like in China, if a brand wants to stay relevant, then they always had to be on the cutting edge of what is the new thing. And even if they were two steps behind the absolute pioneers, they still had to be following in that direction because otherwise they've lost relevancy long ago and they can't hold on in the market except maybe in some very rural areas with two grandmas who still buy the brand because
I want to talk about Gen Alpha. It's incredible. They just canceled all the tradition. They get married in McDonald's or hot pot restaurant. They sit down on the pavement and have a beer from Family Mart. And this is the person who doesn't really want to follow the tradition or heritage. They want to have a lifestyle that speaks to their true, authentic self. So now, how can you talk to this consumer? So how can the white rabbit, talk to this consumer? Where do you
Hmm.
find place in their life to benefit their life or to show their unique, authentic self? This is, I think, every consumer in the world is moving in that direction, except China is much faster.
Of course.
It's much more, like, it's just much more because there are so many people. You know, you can see it so clearly, the trend in the making, in the shaping. And so, you know, we have certain people who can read those trends and give us guidelines in advance because they can read the minds of the consumers. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that, yes, anybody who claims, I think also that I find it very quite, well, bad sentence structure, Kathryn, native speaker problems. I find it problematic if somebody calls themselves a market expert of China, because I think China is such a huge, China is just so huge that, yeah, and things move so fast. It's very difficult to call yourself an expert. I think that being humble and staying open for innovation is something that we're always going to have to do for this.
I don't ever call myself an expert. I have a certain experience, which is maybe expertise, but not an expert.
Yeah.
And I really, the more I know, the less I know. This is how it feels after
But at
15 years.
least you know more of what you don't know.
Mm, I know some people, you know, I can always give someone a phone call when I know what I don't know.
Mhm.
So that's the value here. And yeah.
So we've spoken a little bit about how brands need to localize for the market and for the consumers. Maybe you could just give us a quick rundown. The traditional approach that companies have taken with finding import partners for China, and the, let's say, and the difficulties that there are with those methods. Because I mean, I've seen quite a few things. Um, I've seen quite a few things over the years in China, and some of them work for a period of time, and then, like everything else, the market evolves, and that method just doesn't work anymore, or people are not responding to it in the sense of it doesn't resonate with them anymore. What, in your eyes, have been the most traditional methods of people finding an import partner in China?
So, me coming from Europe, and European Union funding is the prevalent source of funding. So, as much as people say that Chinese electric vehicles are subsidized, many of European food companies exist only because of subsidies from European Union too.
And
So,
farmers,
sorry,
and the farmers who are behind them
the
also.
farmers, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So I'm not sure that, you know, we need to blame or finger point. Maybe we start from finger pointing at ourselves because this is how the European food business is supported. And so, obviously, the best products I've seen are produced in some rural place. And that rural place has, let's say, limited option to hire an expert manager near the farm, right? And
Mhm.
so they hire a friend. That friend doesn't really speak English, probably hasn't even been to the capital. So for them to travel to China, wow, this is such a big achievement, you know. And unfortunately, they're not particularly trained by the CEO, and usually the only guideline the CEO gives them is that one trip to China, one container a year, otherwise we cancel China. These would be the expectations with no training. And then usually they use European Union funds and go together with the European company representing pavilions in some form of exhibition, and they
Mhm.
would collect a lot of business cards, and they would find 200 business cards. And I talked to them, I talked to those people. They say, Lina, you know, the first time I went, I thought each of them is a buyer. I thought that each 200 is a buyer. um, which, you know, you and me being in business for a while, we
Mhm.
know that out of 200, if there is one, you're lucky, if you came to exhibition unprepared. So I think these are the challenges. I don't know. Do you have anything to add? This is my perspective after 15 years. I think training should be provided to the people, especially from the regions. I love these people very much. But the thing is that for them, this cultural shock, there is a reason why they stayed in that village, right?
Yeah.
So then to go into the world and not to talk why you're better than the capital, but to talk why you're better product for the Chinese consumer in all of the choices in the world. That's a big ask. I think there should be a lot of training. I think there should be, you know, support of really like identifying who is really a person to talk to, even at the exhibition.
Yeah.
Um, should be Chinese support too.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of those companies, firstly, they don't really know who would be, they don't have some idea about what characteristics would be their ideal buyer. They didn't really think about it. They're going with that approach of whoever wants to buy, they can have the product because I'm just so grateful that somebody will take the one container that finances my trip to China and
Salary. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and that keeps my boss happy and validates my worth in the company, if you like.
But then can you
Um,
sell the second one?
that's the second container. I mean, realistically speaking, you can sell an awful lot of product into China, like to an importer, without ever selling a single piece off the shelf. Because if all that importer does is put the product on the shelves, first of all, he puts the first product on the shelves in Guangdong. He puts the second container on the shelves in, I don't know, he puts the second container in Hubei or in Henan, somewhere like this, on the shelf. Maybe not even a single consumer has bought one single product, but his warehouse is empty because there's so many doors and China is so big that he can put product onto the shelf almost in an unlimited way. Of course, it's not sustainable business for him, also for you, but I think that people need to have that idea of, firstly, who do they need to be talking to? They need to do the right preparation for their, if they're going with a trade fair, with a national pavilion, they also need to be prepared and to try and look for who are the kind of buyers that they're looking to target up front, and to really use all of the resources that are at their disposal, because often people, they take the cheap exhibition space, but they don't use all of the other resources that would go with that to make sure that they've got a good preparation and they're really ready to have conversations at the trade fair rather than just collect business cards. And I think it starts with all of those really basic things, which are things that I really love to help companies with, like just the kind of building blocks of export, like Lego stones, just, lining them all up. And then to actually go and to work with somebody, to have somebody who's on their side, who can help them really find the right partner. I mean, you don't go to a bar on a Friday night, have some guy buy you a drink or dinner, and then get married on Saturday. That just isn't the way that the world works in the real.
Hollywood works like that. So there are a lot of people believing China is a Hollywood movie. A miracle will happen. It's a gamble. I think what I would like to add to this is, in my case, the latest project we had, it took one flight to Hong Kong, one meeting, a pallet of samples, and then now it's in 7-Eleven all over town. But I know the buyer, I've been working with him for years. The buyer has been interested in the product. The product was requested by the supermarkets here. And so it was one trip. So it is possible, but it takes many years for me and many meetings before that one trip to make
Yes.
sure that it goes well. And so the person who comes for that meeting, they need to be prepared. Yesterday, I was talking to an exhibition organizer, and they said, there are companies that leave the exhibitions very unhappy. And I said, why? And he said, this is when it's not the CEO who comes, but somebody junior, just because they needed to send someone. And these people are not trained, they're introverted, so they're just in their phones doing no matter what. They don't really have an eye contact, they don't say hi, they don't introduce the company. So in the end, the exhibition was just a trip, you know.
Yeah, I saw this last year at um, last year at Biofach. I saw it the other way round. I purposely went. I went to the Chinese pavilion.
Wow,
Um,
how was it?
more because more because I went to the Chinese pavilion because I thought they would have some good tea and
Yeah.
see what
Did
was
you?
going on. And realistically speaking, it was over China last year. Biofach was during like the Chinese New Year period, very much the holiday period, and exactly like you say, I walked in and there were, I'm going to say, maybe 15 or 16 Chinese companies within this country pavilion. And as you walked past almost every stand, they were like this. And even if they were looking up, when they saw a white face coming towards them, because, and if you
So
asked
I've
questions,
worked with these people. I took 2 weeks to train them, and we even like facilitated the, let's say, play pretend meetings. So
mhm,
I would suddenly appear, and they would suddenly need to answer questions. So we drilled them through the process for maybe, a week. And then
yeah,
they started loosening up and feeling very happy, but they had the pitch. How do I introduce myself in English and Chinese? We had everything prepared. So it becomes their, if you wake them up in the middle of the night, they can do it.
mhm,
And same with my clients. If they want to go to exhibition, which I don't do so much anymore, I do it differently. I think it's easier to meet a person face to face if it is a meeting that's prepared,
mhm,
rather than to expect someone to pop up in the exhibition. But then for exhibitions, we would give lists of 10 questions to ask to the potential buyer, to make sure that this is a buyer, really.
yeah. It's a
So
qualifying process, isn't
it
it? The same as any
correct.
other sales process.
Correct. But then this should be something that a CEO should be involved in and think about the strategy, right? And then what I'm telling is that I have worked with these people who prefer to be in their phone, but with the right support, they all were so happy, joyful, and excited to actually meet the people, to talk about potential. So it's just, I think, that support, that time, that
Yeah.
encouragement for the team. And no matter where they come from, could be a smallest village. It's awesome because it's authentic. But that introverted side is the challenge. But if you just give them enough support and encourage them, I think it's has an awesome potential.
Yeah. No, I think that this is always an interesting point as to whether people should even be going to an exhibition if they don't have, I mean, it's one thing, I would say, going to an exhibition if you're already working in the market, or if it's an international exhibition, is a different situation to, I want to enter the Chinese or the Korean or what um, whatever market it happens to be. And so I go to an exhibition in that country to see it. And I think that the preparation you need to do for that is a different one if you really want to get any value out of the out of the thing. I mean, in the past, I generally didn't go to any expos for the purpose of looking for partners. I would go to expos to have meetings with existing partners,
For
or maybe
support.
for support, or to have meetings with partners um, who I was in the middle of negotiating with, and I wanted to see how they reacted in a different situation, like at an expo. And that was a convenient way for me to talk to 3 or 4 different people on one day.
So I wanted to go back to your story about having an importer who places your product in, let's say, Guangdong, Hubei,
Mhm,
and everywhere else. Did you mean that because they signed the contract with a big brand, like the brand you used to work with, they must show certain shelves or they must show certain retailers, and therefore they will move the product to the shelves without knowing that anybody is going to pick them up from the shelf? Or what did you mean by that? I haven't seen that happen to me, because usually the buyers that we work with, they buy what they can sell. They don't buy
mhm,
extra, because we don't like the price dump that could
mhm.
potentially and then liquidating all the stock if
Yeah.
it doesn't move. So, we the way I've done it, at least, it was a bit more careful.
Yeah.
So
For
I
me
wonder
too.
what is the situation you have in mind with that, because I personally haven't experienced it.
I've seen it a couple of times with things like beer brands
Mm-hmm.
where the importer has very strongly believed that it will move and that this is a product where you can't go wrong, let's say, and that they've pushed too much product into the market. It wasn't a project of mine, it was a project of a friend's.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I've seen it in the past also with a couple of Italian brands, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, that importers expected, they had different expectations, and they put products on the shelf, and it didn't really things didn't really
So
move in the way
let's
that they
let's
thought it
discuss
should.
what happens here. So they still got the advance payment, right? The
Yeah,
brand
yeah,
that sold.
yeah, yeah,
So the only challenge from now is that the market price of the product will drop, right?
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly.
The way I have seen people tell me stories is that they entered into some shady agreements where they didn't get advance payment, but they were so, I call it, wanting it too much cost,
Mm-hmm,
where they want to see China happen so fast, so they will send the product with no payment, and then they will expect the sales to happen miraculously with no support, with
mm-hmm,
marketing, and then they would, of course, say it was the Chinese partner who cheated them, but actually the products didn't get sold, which also didn't contribute to those sales. So it was a gamble, and I think anything that seems too good to be true usually is.
yeah,
So you
absolutely.
have reasonable expectations, reasonable business practices, sign your contracts, and validate your buyers. Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, Hashi is asking lots and lots of questions. I'll go back to your questions in a minute, Hashi. I just want to ask one of mine again first. How are you recommending now for your brands to start to come into the market and test it? I mean, in the past, it's not a method that I've used like this, but I've seen lots of people recommend cross-border sales online for food brands, and I've always seen this to be slightly problematic if there isn't a proper plan for moving forward, um, going like if there isn't really a proper strategic plan behind that. I think that brands often go into this online cross-border online sales environment thinking, okay, they can do everything themselves, and that's why they go for it. First of all, it seems like a cheap option to enter into the market, but they don't do the research on how their pricing structure would have to look if they want to go into offline sales, or they don't look at how the marketing investment would have to be, and they then either go one of two ways. Either they get some traction because the brand is maybe known in a certain niche for consumers, or they fall into a kind of dark hole if they've gone with like Alibaba supermarket or something like that, because for Alibaba, they'll take the product, but they're also not necessarily promoting all of their brands, you know? Um, and I've not seen it work really well, maybe because companies are not planning properly for it. But maybe you've got different experience.
Actually, yes. Our first step is to
Mm-hmm.
do a B2B tasting. So we invite 10 market
Mm-hmm.
industry experienced leaders, importers, say restaurant owners, say bar owners, depending on the category. And then obviously, if you work with a company that has like 200 or 300 SKUs, you need 10 for China at first. So we taste, we discuss what is this category doing in China, what are the opportunities, and from there we start to think about trade marketing and follow through. So one option would be to go to social commerce. So it's not e-commerce traditionally like
Mm-hmm.
Tmall, But you do need to build a brand.
Yes.
Today, the consumers in China go to supermarket like it's a showroom and they buy online because it gets delivered.
Hmm.
And then the information about your product, the way it's presented online, has to be much more extensive and much more lifestyle focused. It's less about ingredients. So we find that actually what is a workable strategy, and there are a lot of, you would be surprised, there are a lot of very beautiful service providers who don't charge a service fee. They charge only marketing fee. But to
Hmm.
make a splash in China, the marketing cost would be 10, 15,000 euros a month at
Hmm.
least. And
Yep.
then from here, you can build out a brand that sells, say, 50 million renminbi a year in 3 or 5 years if you work with a really trustworthy service provider. So I've seen it happen, you know.
Hmm.
But then if you are really wanting it too much and you're like trying to test the waters with a smaller budget, then it's difficult. Then you should go and find yourself somebody like us. We're, let's say, fractional expert manager. So we will be the ones talking to the importers and negotiating and go the offline route. But usually, if you have 6 months of this exposure online, you can use that to reach very good importers by showing them this is the traction, this is the consumer feedback, and then bigger and the badder, um, say, networks will open up and people will have more trust to place bigger orders because your product has already been acknowledged by consumers. So there is, anything you say about China will be true.
Yep.
There are many fish in the sea. They say, there's a Chinese saying, a lot of different birds in the forest.
Yep.
So you need to pick your bird, you know, you need to really do your work and
But
see
like you
who.
say, that's an approach that you have with um, social media and social selling with a plan behind it. It's not just a let's
Yes.
throw some noodles at the wall and see what sticks.
No, no, no. Like anywhere in the world, there's a lot of work to be done to make a splash. And as you see, the latest splash is Kanye West, who now ranks higher on Google than Grammys. So you need to think, how can you make that splash? So he generated more exposure on media than Grammys itself. Do you think we could actually do the questions at the very end? It's a bit
Sure.
distracting. Yeah, thank you. You can pick the questions you like and we can answer at the very end.
Happy. Okay. Um, Thank you. I think that's a really
Is
good.
it helpful? Does it open up
No,
more?
no,
Because
I think
there
it's
are no bad guys in the market. There are certain
no.
people, but there are all the business, you know, structures that could be working for you if you know how to use them, right? And I have seen beautiful, beautiful success stories with cross-border, you know, tens of millions of dollars. Um, yeah.
But yes, I've seen a lot of success stories with cross border, but I think that there's more to it. I think that the problem is that people often only see the tip of the iceberg, and they don't see all of the work that goes into
Right.
getting the success on a cross border platform or on a social selling through a social selling channel, and that they assume that just putting the product there is enough to test the water, and that is something that I'm always telling people that isn't enough to get you over
So
the line.
we also test the water. We invite 10 market
Yeah, but that's
leaders,
a
10
planned
market
approach.
industry. Correct. We invite them, and then we have a list of questions that we want to answer. We do the tasting. We invite a market leader. Say for alcohol, we invite a bartender who's
Mhm.
recognized, has won awards, and they do the presentation. They explain this is the value of this product. This is how I would use it. They make a quick cocktail, and then it's a very like human interaction about potential, and everybody's so excited. It's just so much more fun than an exhibition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
So we
also
do
so
that too.
much.
We test the market.
Yeah, and it's also so much less emotionally draining than an
Right.
exhibition, because an exhibition you have so much empty time that, or
Mhm.
you have so much stuff that's not really focused on what you actually need to have. There's so
Mhm.
much wasted um, energy if you're not in a very planned situation of having all of your meetings laid out before you go into that
Mhm.
meeting.
Correct. Also, you need to invite people to visit your exhibition. So it's
Yes.
not only that you're waiting there for
Hmm.
gambling luck, for the roll to come on, to
Hmm.
the right dice to roll. You can invite people if you know who you want to meet.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there are layers and layers of how you need to behave in the exhibition. You need to do really well on social media because you need to stand out, to show your China experience, to make sure that the people know what you're into, what your brand is into. So we're teaching the clients if they choose to go to an exhibition, which I have not done for a while, but if they do, it's just like our way is so much more efficient and saves a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I like that focused approach. My mentor says the first thing you need to do is think how to save energy,
Yeah.
to be more strategic. So I think anything that we do, we try to make sure we, prioritize the right things.
Yeah. And I think because I'm coming a little bit to the end time wise now, so maybe we can go back to Hashi's question about whether you feel that,
Oh, I didn't see the question.
okay, whether you feel that a foreign brand can work across multi-brand stores like 7-Eleven, Circle K, Park and Shop, etc.
Yeah, so Harish is asking a question about Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Hong Kong is one market. What we were talking with Kathryn is China mainland. So Circle K, 7-Eleven, and Park and Shop don't exist in China mainland. Who we work with is not the stores. We work with distributors who have access to the stores and they know how to structure the pricing. They know how much the listing fees cost, and this
Yeah.
would be the that needs to be negotiated between the brand and the importer. And also the importer must have ability to distribute the brand. So in Hong Kong in particular, the distributors I work with, they have lots of trucks.
Yep.
And
For
then
Hong Kong,
what is
it's
the
key.
fun thing is we can put our brand on the truck and then we can see the brand, and we've done it. It's pretty cool. You can see the brand picture, driving around Hong Kong.
Yep.
Yeah, and yes, if we work with a certain product, we want to reach the certain target audience. So, like if we go to, say, Hong Kong, then all of the listed shops would be obviously covered, but usually you need to make a choice between 7-Eleven and Circle K because they don't kind of come together. In China mainland, you need to probably choose very well your target audience as well and find e-commerce channels which these consumers like to visit, or the kind of channels offline that they like to visit. I know a beautiful story where the brand of ice cream sold 100 million SKUs because they targeted the person who works in an office and they wanted that person, when they have the afternoon craving from 2 to 4 p.m., to go downstairs in their convenience store and buy ice cream for all the office. And this happened and they got 100 million SKUs sold year one. So you really need to know that consumer. That means that it's less about the chain name, but more about the location and the situation when they would buy that product.
Yeah.
This is how you need to think about China. You need to know your consumer that well.
Yeah. And when is their purchasing opportunity, or when are they likely to buy what's the
They,
occasion
yeah.
that they go for? Okay, I think we really are pretty much at the end now, time-wise. Maybe just quickly, you can give us a bit of a rundown how you are supporting brands with technology, especially at the moment, to increase their chances of success in the market.
So we did a very big research. I have four
Mhm.
PhDs on my team. It's incredible, and we asked a lot of questions. And thank you so much for you also who helped me collect all the data. We found that they don't need education. They need somebody to help them do the job that they need to do and free up their hands to have the time to think, strategize, plan. And so the technology that we're building, and we already have some prototypes in place, and we already, spent a few years with it. We're building an expert assistant who will help process all the leads from the exhibition and automate all the engagement and follow-ups and communication. And also we're helping to develop an assistant who will help clear the customs, so collect all the documents, proofread, translate, and all of that. So the technology is there. It's just that I find that the people who work with me, when I show them what we have created, they look at the technology in a way that my grandmother reacted to technology when I introduced her to Skype. She knows it's great, she knows it works, she's so excited, but she's so scared to even start. So we will need to spend a little bit of time getting people more accustomed to using technology as your right hand, and we will need to make it even more simple, even more straightforward for the people to be able to use it as a daily option. And this is something very, very exciting. And what I found, it gives me access to very, very impressive people who are already becoming my beta testers, my co-developers, very big players in China market.
That's cool. And are you also looking at things that will, let's say, make the task of preparing all of those GACC type registration documents easier? Because I know that that's a big headache for a lot of companies.
GACC is step one. There is much more coming after
Yep.
this. And there are already solutions digital that are targeting GACC. So this is something so very simple that for me, it's just too much time and energy for something that's so easy to do. Actually, there are already online technologies invented for this. I'm not trying to compete with anyone. We're usually building something that hasn't been done,
Hmm.
which is more fun for me. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I just wondered because I heard a lot of
It exists.
discussions around about who is doing it and who's as reliable, and whether people, European companies often are quite skeptical about these kind of tools, and they like the
Actually,
idea.
it's in English. They can just submit everything, the clients that I work with. So there are two positions here. Business service providers, they say, wow, my clients are stupid. That's why I have a business. In my case, I work with very smart clients, and that's why I have a business. So my
Mhm.
clients, the people I work with, they have all registered GCC by themselves. This was never a problem. They
Yeah,
understand this is a part of their job, and they will
yeah.
just dedicate a day or two, call the people they need to call, and this is the easiest, by far, the easiest step. I don't know why there is so much friction. Maybe people feel like this is annoying. I feel sometimes Europeans are very emotional.
It's
So
I would say it's one of those steps that you just have to. It's one of those jobs that nobody really enjoys doing, but you just have to
yeah,
just
it's
sit
like brushing
down.
your teeth in the morning,
Yeah, you
like
just sit down and you just
do it. Yeah, correct.
you just
Yeah,
do it, right? I mean,
correct. So I don't see anybody doing it for you. I think you need to sit down and do it. And companies have asked me, but I said we can have a call and I will be there to support you. My hourly rate is this, but then maybe you can do it yourself and ask me questions if you have any. And they never have questions. Actually, if they sit down and do it, there's no questions to be asked.
okay, that's interesting.
No, we're not doing it because it's so basic that I don't believe that my clients are stupid. I think they're very intelligent and very smart, and they can
Yeah,
figure it. This one they can figure out.
it's only those, like all those kind of meat and dairy stuff that's the complicated, more complicated. But even then, most countries, there's support from the veterinary organizations
From
that,
the government level,
yeah,
these are governmental agreements. So
yeah,
in some cases, it is impossible. There's nothing I could be,
yeah.
using technology for.
Okay.
Yeah. You know that.
I've played all of these games before now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's been
yeah,
a while.
yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today. It has been
Thank
lovely to
you.
chat. And also, I see that there's a few
What,
people
what do
on.
you think is the biggest takeaway from you? What did you learn yourself?
I think for me, it's always interesting to discuss because, there's always some new method, and I really like this method. I know it's not something I heard first time today, but I really like
Hmm.
this method you have of sitting down with a group of potential
Buyers.
buyers or consumers to just test the products. And this, I think, is a really great approach, you know. So
Yeah. It's not. easy to do, but it's also not very difficult. I have 15 years of network and I speak Chinese, right? So
Yep.
it's a phone call away, and I really need to know what I should say to the person. Where's the value there?
Yeah.
So here, the way we think about business in Hong Kong is create value, make money. So first you need to create value, and then you make money. So you need to really talk about value from the first sentence on.
Yeah.
So then it's
Well,
not an ask. I'm not asking you or begging you. I'm creating an opportunity for you to come and enjoy and meet cool people, you know?
exactly.
So it's a rephrase and reframe. Nobody is annoyed to come to my tastings. They're so annoyed to go to exhibitions. So just the whole emotion that they bring to meeting you is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it much better.
And it's
Thank
a
you so
much,
much for everyone listening. I can see beautiful comments coming in. Thank you.
yeah. And I
Hope
think
it's been fruitful.
it's also a very nice way to have people there in a way that's not stressful for them,
Right.
because exhibition is somehow you go in and it smells strange and the air is bad and it's just that your whole system just feels immediately that this is like, ugh. However much you enjoy an expo sometimes for a day, it's
I personally have been to many such events, and instead of going to the expo, I make a side event instead and make
yeah,
people come.
yeah,
And I
I
like the
prefer
side
that too.
events because everybody is there, and I found that it is such an unexplored opportunity for food exhibitions because it's very popular for technology exhibitions. If there is a big tech show,
Hmm.
90% of time everybody spends is in a side events, and there are very big companies organizing all kinds of side events. So I feel like this is totally under developed and unexplored. And I think the way these tech companies use social media to talk about it, I think any food company could benefit from thinking about that way as well.
Yeah,
Live streaming from the booth. This is what we did in some of the exhibitions. Also, like flooding the internet with information from feedback from consumers because this is what the buyers will want to know, and just being more strategic about going there rather than just to go on a business trip overseas.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think that that's always a key point to give to any client or potential
Mhm.
client, that the strategy has to be like the basis of things. It's no good just flying by the seat of your pants or just gambling, because you're wasting your time, your money, your energy. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, so some people like gambling, we cannot take it
Yeah.
away. Then I work with the other people who are not
Yeah.
stupid. I work with
Yeah.
very smart people.
Yeah.
And, I find so much beauty in creating good products. And then to finding a new home for these products on a Chinese family table, it's great. It's incredible, when you really think of it.
Yeah.
Then
It's
the things I promote is healthy heritage, something more better for you, which has the value to that particular consumer. So for me, it's very exciting.
it's the best kind when things work out with your international partners. Yeah. And I think on that note, we are really going to finish today.
Okay, thank you so
So,
much.
thank you. And thank you to everybody who came to listen to us and for asking questions and putting comments in the comment section. It's always really important to get some feedback and to listen to what people's concerns are and to see how we can all learn and move forward together. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye
The
bye.
Chinese heart.